problems for pet parents to treat is when their own dogs are fighting with each other. That is so stressful. The dogs are hurting each other, and very often, at least when I had two dogs that fought, this definitely happened to me. We are reaching in to break up the dog fight and getting bitten ourselves while the dogs come out unscathed. Not only is it just heartbreaking to see your dog end up in the ER, but it's also really expensive to have dogs that have injuries that have to be treated on overnight or emergency. There are some essential things that you can do to help your dogs who aren't getting along to get along better. There are four options that you can choose from when you have two dogs fighting with each other. No option is better than the other. It really just depends on what is best for your family and the dogs. So one option would be to rehome one of the dogs to a trusted family member or friend. This feels like giving up, but if it allows the dog to have a safe and happy life with someone who loves them, where they aren't being attacked by another dog, that sounds like a win to me. Another option is to create gate and separate. Just keep your dogs separated for the rest of their lives. That feels inconvenient, but having done it myself, I will tell you that it's a lot less stressful than having dogs who fight. Sometimes you will need medication in order for your dogs to live separately. Sometimes dogs do want to be together, but a lot of the time what's happening is that dogs are whining or crying or being distressed when they're separated because they want to be with the family. So sometimes you need a medication or a supplement in order to make that change effectively. Another option would be partial reintroduction. This would be introduction where the dogs will always have a safety net. They're going to be on leash, they're going to be separated somehow in a room, but they can be together without that seek and destroy stare down and a resulting fight at the gate. This usually requires medication or supplements for both dogs and working with a positive reinforcement dog trainer steadily for about 2 to 3 months. Some pet parents opt for that full integration of the dogs going back to the lives that they lived before. I think this is an unrealistic goal because once there's trauma and fighting, we can't go back in time and make that disappear. But we can get a more complete reintroduction. But that takes more like 6 to 12 months of working with a positive reinforcement dog trainer and behavior modification. Statistically, about 40% of these dogs that are treated all the way through are going to relapse and fight again. So there's really not a time, even with full treatment, where I can rest my head on the pillow and feel completely safe that there's not going to be a dog fight. There's 6 things that you should know if you have two dogs in your house that are fighting with each other. Number 1, if they are already causing injury to each other enough that you have to seek help, they probably are not going to work this out on its own. Number 2, letting dogs fight it out is foolish and dangerous, and it's going to land you with a very expensive bill to the ER. And I have seen 2 of my patients actually die when pet parents have let their dogs fight it out. So don't do that. If you're wondering how you got here because your dogs were fighting once a year for the first couple of years they were together, and now they can't even be in the same room, let me tell you that is expected. Dogs that fight infrequently, very, very commonly, end up being dogs that fight every day. That's why we want to treat dog fights, even if they're little scuffles, immediately. If the fights are causing injury to the dogs that require medical attention, it's very likely that both dogs will have to be medicated and receive behavioral treatment in order for the problem to get better. Even if you think it's not true, 99% of the time, both dogs are involved. Sometimes there's an anxious dog who barks a lot, or maybe gets very excited at the door and moves their body around a lot and they bump the other dog. Then that second dog is aggressive. So the behavior of the first dog contributes to the behavior of the second dog, and you can't just expect the second dog to tolerate the first dog's behavior. So both dogs always need to be evaluated and treated. One of the first things that you do to treat dogs who are fighting with each other is avoid situations where they fight. So it's helpful to know when dogs fight. 73% of dogs fight over stuff. So that's food, toys, beds. About a quarter to a half of dogs fight over pet parent attention. A little over a third of dogs fight when they're overstimulated. That's at the window, barking at something, or when the pet parent first comes home. About 18% of dogs fight in tight spaces. And the times when I see that the most is like a coffee table where dogs are trapped, or hallways. That's a really common one. Coming into a sliding glass door that's only partially open, that's another tight space. Dogs fight because life is stressful. If you have a dog who has noise phobia, for example, and he's more stressed during that time, he's more likely to engage in a dog fight. Dogs fight because they're sick. This is super common. That's why we always want to work up dogs that have any behavior problem. And about 13% of dogs fight for, we don't know why. Sometimes, unfortunately, we can't always parse out what the reason is for the dog fights. But the good news is that the treatments that are applied can help regardless of the underlying cause. If your dog is fighting, the first thing you do is you bring your dogs to your veterinarian. Let's make sure that they are well, that they are healthy. In the meantime, completely separate them. If your dogs are too stressed to be separated, then ask your veterinarian for a medication or a supplement that can help your dogs to tolerate being separated. You've got to stop the chaos, the injury, and the fighting immediately, because every time you put those dogs back together, even if it's a microaggression, it makes the problem worse. There could be a time where it's going to get so bad that it's going to be very, very hard to treat, right? And we don't want to get to that point. The best thing that you can do is make sure that the first time you see aggression between your dogs, you get with your veterinarian and start treatment immediately.